Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. This time round, we're taking a look at a few games for the Oculus Quest 2, or Meta Quest, or whatever the hell they're calling it these days. Either way, it's a great piece of kit that, while not being the most powerful thing out there, has loads of games that you just can't experience anywhere else, for now at least. Something to note here is that all the games shown are available directly from the Meta store and run natively on the Quest 2. Some do have PC VR versions, but I don't have a PC good enough for that and I never intend on getting one, so everything shown here is direct from the Quest 2's internal recording function. Something else I'd like to point out with VR game footage is that actually playing the game is totally different and so much more immersive than watching these flat videos. So now how about I shut the hell up and we just take a look at 6 games that I think everyone should own for the Quest 2. First up is The Climb 2 from Crytek. This game is literally what it says and has you climbing around various locations. Your goal is just to get to the top of whatever it is that you're climbing. You have a handful of locales, from tower blocks to mountains and nice rocky bays. They all look really good and have a fair amount of stuff going on for you to look out for. Your controllers are, of course, your hands, and you'll be searching for places to grab and hang on to. Usually it's rocks that are poking out, and they often have obvious markers to let you know they can be held onto. Later on though, and in harder stages, you also have ladders, poles, slides, and even blocks that crumble as you're holding onto them to worry about. These work really well. The game gives you the option to play a more casual mode where you don't have to worry about these things, but when they are there, they can add a crazy amount of tension to your climbs when you're hanging onto a ledge with one hand and frantically searching for something to grab onto with the next one before it breaks off and you plummet to your death. Another cool thing in the harder difficulties is that you have to keep re-chalking your hands for better grip. Also, your hands get tired when you aren't holding on to something with both hands, and if you take too long with just one hand, you'll run out of stamina and fall, adding another sense of urgency. You can also jump to reach blocks that are just too far away. These are always very tense sections, mainly because it can be hard to orient yourself, and also because sometimes it doesn't register that you've grabbed the ledge, even though you could have swore that you did. Thankfully, there are plenty of checkpoints all over the place, so if you do fall, it's never too far away. The whole game is basically a time trial, so you have unlimited lives, and the aim is just to get to the top as fast as possible. But with the great graphics, I often wanted to hang around, pun intended, and take in the view. This is a really fun game, but I do have some issues with it, which I'm not sure if is a problem with the game itself or the play space that I have, but I would often be told by the game that I needed to move back to my original position, even though I hadn't taken a step in any direction, though maybe I had. Sometimes you don't realise when you're playing in VR. Also, I had a problem where the screen would go black if I didn't hold my arms far enough away. I couldn't always tell why, but I think this happens instead of your head clipping through things, but it was still very annoying. My biggest issue though is that there just isn't all that much content, especially for the quite high price. The game is more than £20, and while you do get about 10 or so different climbs, and to be fair there is a lot of replay value in those climbs, other than actually climbing there's not much going on. It would have been nice if there were hidden things to collect on the way, or some more wacky themed climbs, like maybe one where you're climbing out of the depths of hell and you've got to avoid monsters, or you're climbing out of space and the gravity is different, or maybe like a jungle setting where you have to swing through trees. It would have been nice to have something that wasn't just a straightforward climb, though calling these straightforward isn't really the right thing to do, as all the climbs here are very varied, and they are a lot of fun to replay over and over to try and beat your score and time. You can even play this with 2 players where you have to race to the top, which I haven't gotten to try yet, but I can imagine it being a lot of fun. Overall though, The Climb 2 is an excellent game that's definitely worth getting, even if I do think the price could drop a couple of quid, and yeah, I did buy it when it was on sale, but it's probably the best looking game I have on the system so far. The graphics are fantastic, and the gameplay is a great combination of relaxing and also tense gameplay, depending on what kind of climb you want to do that day. Definitely get this one if you can. Here is Pistol Whip. Pistol Whip is a fantastic rhythm-based shooter with one of the best soundtracks to any game that I've played, and I've played Donkey Kong Country. You have a story mode, which kind of acts as a tutorial for the most part. In fact, there's a couple of story modes, each with different types of gameplay and characters, which is cool. The gameplay here sees you moving down a huge amount of single on-rails corridors where you have to of course shoot everyone you see while avoiding their bullets which come at you. Simple, but not quite. Aiming and shooting is very precise, thankfully offering a much needed and generous aim assist. This can be turned off though if you're feeling hardcore. You reload by swinging your arms down. There's a few different enemy types and even bosses that take varying amounts of shots to put down, and the bosses all tend to have specific weak spots too. You can take a couple of hits before you die, and you only have 1 life per level, then you have to restart. If you get shot, you'll lose your shield. Get shot again and you're done for. However, you can see a number in your shield on the left. Shoot that many enemies and your shield will recharge. Or, as is alluded to by the game's title, you can pistol whip people, which is a really important thing to get used to. Here, pistol whips will kill any enemy with just 1 hit, and it will also completely refill your health and reload your weapons. Of course, you can't hit everyone, as most enemies are far away from you. This means you really have to plan ahead at times to keep one person alive so you can smack them in the face. You get a variety of weapons, from your standard pistols to 3-round bursts like Robocop, and you also get 6 shooters and shotguns. All of the weapons have different ammo counts and firing speeds. The shotguns only have 2 shots before they can be reloaded, but the spread on them means you can take a few enemies out with just 1 shot. There's also levels where you have no weapons at all. These are actually pretty fun, and you have to rely on your dodging and punching ability to get through. And the game does get tough. It's so much fun though, playing on the higher difficulties with loads of enemies coming at you, and things do get really hectic, but you will want to try again and again. You may remember a couple of minutes ago I called this a rhythm shooter, and that's because if you look closely, the enemies actually all appear in time with the music, and you actually score more points for shooting them to the beat. This is a really cool mechanic, and while it's one that you don't actually have to pay attention to, if you really want to look cool while playing this game, well, at least as cool as anyone can look while wearing one of these things, that is the way to do it. You can tell when you're killing people to the beat, as your score appears in red above their head when you shoot them. You also have to watch out for walls that come towards you, sidestepping out of the way when they appear. These are all done to the music too, so you'll be sidestepping to the beat. It's great. And the songs here are just fantastic. The music here, along with the highly stylized visuals, are just incredible, and they really get you in the mood for playing. The first few times I played this, I was a little disappointed that it was just a single path that you're going down, but it works really well, and it will keep you coming back again and again just to do a few levels. There's also modifiers you can play with too, letting you choose to make the game easier or harder for yourself. This is actually one of my favourite games on the Quest 2, and one that I think I'll never get bored of. If you want a game that makes you feel like John Wick, then this one is a go-to. Again, I do have to stress that when you're in the headset, the game looks infinitely better and is really immersive. It was a toss-up of putting either this or Beat Saber in this video, but I think I actually prefer playing this game, but that's mainly because I like shooting things, so I'm sure Beat Saber will appear in part 2. Oh, and a huge thank you to my friend Chris, who gifted me this game. What a legend. Table Tennis is a really fun game of table tennis. Now, there isn't really that much to say about this one, as it literally is table tennis. When I first got it as part of a bundle with a bunch of other games, I played it once and then kind of ignored it. But then when we got a second headset in our family, I played it 2-player and realised just how much fun this one actually is. The game does a fairly good job of teaching you the basics of serving and the rules, and after you've played a few rounds, you'll start to get used to the power needed to make certain shots here. You can of course play against the computer at varying difficulties, but the real appeal here is just playing against random people from all over the world, which is now what I've found myself doing when I've just got a few minutes to spare. The gameplay itself sees you just swinging your racket. Of course, the harder you do this, the harder you hit the ball, and I think you can put spin on it. I'm sure I've seen people doing it against me, but so far I've not managed to get that down. But I will keep practicing. It's all super simple, and as I keep saying, but it's all in the right ways. The game is crazy fun and addictive. I think that is partly down to the simplicity. You can change the room that you're playing in, as well as your avatar, but other than that, it's all just a game of table tennis. Which is a bit of a shame. It would have been nice to have some new tables, stages, balls and bats to unlock. They didn't have to do anything wacky like in a Mario sports tile, they could literally just be cosmetic, but a reason to keep playing and score points other than just for the hell of it would have been nice. It would also have been nice if this was more than 2 players. Now, of course, it makes sense to keep the actual games to one-on-one, but the option to have maybe an open room where your friends could come and sit and watch the game in VR would be great. And that way you could have knockout tournaments swapping between you on the fly, or you could play winner stays on. I'm not sure when this game last got an update, but I really think it could be a huge selling point for it. And yes, I do expect royalties if that does ever appear in the game. Anyway, despite its basicness, I'm not sure if that's even a word, and lack of any real content, I would actually really recommend this one. You can play with a friend just for fun and not have to worry about score, or if you want to play online and become the best there ever was, you can also do that. From nice and relaxing to dark and violent now, with Death Horizons Reloaded. This was one of the first games I bought for the Quest, along with The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, which I will talk about in a future video, as killing zombies in VR is my idea of heaven. You of course play as some soldier guy who is trapped in a research facility, and no surprise, you have to escape while taking out loads of undead bastards. Now, I am reviewing this on September the 22nd, which is quite soon after a pretty huge update, so I'm going to backtrack just for a minute. When I first got the game, which was about a year ago, they just added the melee combat, letting you hit enemies with pipes, wrenches and other such things that you find laying around. At the time the graphics were okay, looking about as good as something as you'd get on an Xbox 360, which to be honest is fine with me. The environments are all inside a facility, so there isn't much in the way of variety. It's all offices and labs pretty much, but what is cool is that there are secret areas that you can actually climb up to, which often have collectibles. In fact, climbing does become quite a big part of this game. You're able to climb a lot of the surfaces, often in designated areas, but it's cool to hang off a rope while taking down zombies. The gunplay here always has been very satisfying too. You get a few pistols, machine guns and shotguns that are all really good to use, and they look great. All of your items and weapons are stored on your utility belt, so you just grab them off of your body to switch between them. It works very well. And when I first got the game, reloading was done just by holding the gun near your ammo belt, which was a quick way of reloading, but wasn't particularly immersive. Also, the melee combat, which had only just been released, to be blunt, was terrible. While melee weapons were relatively powerful, zombies just didn't react to being hit at all until they died, unlike when you shoot them, where they would recoil or fall over. Luckily, you get a decent amount of ammo in the game, so melee is never really required after the tutorial, and honestly, it really is pointless. It's a shame the effort of putting that in didn't go somewhere else. But it's really a minor gripe, but you don't have to use it. My other big issue was the animation on just about every enemy, which for the most part was just bad and actually quite laughable. The zombies would shamble over to you, but looked like they'd somehow been sped up and they jerked all over the place. While the game was still incredibly fun and playable, it did mean that bits that were meant to be spooky, with zombies running at you in the dark, were actually quite funny because they just looked stupid. But anyway, back to today. Before playing the game for this review, I had to do a big update, as a new level had been added to the game, which had been teased on the main menu for quite some time. The reason I hadn't played it for a while is because I'm actually playing through the game in co-op with the one and only Belt Buckle Bill, so at the time of recording I still haven't actually played the new level. Anyway, I was still very pleased to see that the new level was finally here, and also it wasn't the only new addition. The game now looked noticeably better, with more detailed character models that still look like they'd be at home on the Xbox 360 generation, but the details were all clearer. The gun models all still look great, and now you have proper manual reloading, which really adds to the experience. You now have to eject your magazine with the press of a button, reach into your belt to grab a new clip, put it in the gun and then cock it. This works really well for all the guns, and makes the whole game so much more immersive, and it makes being swarmed by multiple enemies way more tense, as it will be considerably longer for you to reload. The manual reload is optional, so you can leave it as it was, but I'd say if you play with it turned off, then you're not getting the real experience. Thankfully, a lot of the animations have also been updated on the zombies, and are now a hell of a lot better, getting rid of most of the weird sped up look that you got. They could still use some work, but it's much better than it was. The gunplay is still fantastic, and blowing off zombies' heads from across the room never gets old. The only times I sometimes have an issue is when you have to pump the shotgun. It doesn't always work properly. Maybe look into that one, devs. Playing the game in co-op is also an absolute blast. Seeing your friend running around with you and having them save your ass at the last minute while you're reloading is like something out of a movie. You can even throw weapons to each other, so if you run out of ammo and are in a predicament, just throw your pistol to your buddy, watch them catch it and blow off a zombie's head, and you'll both be cheering. Even in single player, the game is really fun to play, and the price is very reasonable for the game. But of course it still isn't perfect. The melee combat seems to have a couple of small tweaks, but is still basically useless, and I really wouldn't care if they removed it completely, unless the team are planning a big update just for the melee combat soon. Also, even with the new level, it's actually quite short. There are a few game modes and you get some challenges that you can do, and it is still fun to go through the game multiple times to find the hidden areas and collectibles that you didn't get as you played through before. Also, something I think is severely lacking is a level of interactivity in the world. There are lockers and things that you can find to open, but other than the ones in the safe rooms that contain weapons and ammo, these are usually empty and just kind of pointless. Also, there's computers with big red buttons and telephones all over the place that you can't even pick up or press. This is literally the first thing that I, and anyone I've shown the game to, has actually tried to do. They just look so prominent and it looks like you're meant to pick them up. So even if they just had a busy tone on the phone, or you pressed the button but it just did an error noise or something like that, it would make the world more believable. I get that it would serve no purpose, but there's so many things in the levels that look like you're meant to interact with them, and then you can't even touch them. Your hands just pass through them. It's quite odd. But anyway, it sounds like I'm really shitting on this game, but I'm not. I just want to be honest. This is a really great game, and I can't believe there aren't dozens more like it. I know I'd buy them all. It's one of the few games that isn't actually on rails. You get to walk around however you want, which is great. The gameplay is really cool with some decent ways to get around the levels. The gunplay is awesome with incredibly satisfying reloads now, and usually when I just want to kill some zombies, this is my go-to game. Highly recommended if you like zombie games, and if you have a mate to play with, well, then it just gets even better. Now for a game that I would say is one of the most enjoyable on the system, Walkabout Mini Golf. Poor old Belt Buckle Bill was telling me for months to buy this game so I could play with him in his golf gang, but I'd always find an excuse not to, usually because I'm a cheap ass and hate spending money. But I finally got the game, and holy crap, I haven't been able to stop playing it since. Yep, it's just a mini game, and that's really all there is to say about the gameplay, but that is a compliment. Playing a round of golf just feels natural, and although you have to get used to how much power is used for the shots, etc., you'll have a blast doing it. There's loads of options to adjust the power sensitivity and things, so if it doesn't feel right, just play around with these and you'll find you'll be able to get it exactly how you need it. The graphics here are really good. They've got a fantastic art style that works really well. Everything is minimalistic, but it still has a good amount of detail. There are deliberate sharp edges on everything, and I just love the way it looks. There's some really nice scenery that you can just go and sit and look at. Most importantly, it's bright and colourful, and everything is just so inviting. Also, the music here is fantastic too, the scenery. And that's another cool thing with the game. While you can just press the trigger button on your controller to teleport to your ball, you can also use the analog stick to move around, not just the hole that you're currently on, but the entire 18-hole environment at any point. Each course has 18 lost balls on it for you to collect too, and these are often quite well hidden and can take a while to find. Once you have found them though, you can choose from any of these balls that you've found. This is a really cool way to get you to explore. The courses themselves are actually all really cool. They've got loads to choose from. These start with your simple mini golf courses and range from Asian gardens, space stations, spooky castles and more. Each course has 18 holes, and once you've beaten it, you unlock the hard mode for that course, which changes up each hole enough that you can almost call them completely new ones. So you're looking at more than 100 courses to get stuck into. You can even purchase more courses through DLC that's incredibly well priced at under £3 per pack. These include both the easy and hard mode for each pack, so it's easily more than 50 holes if you buy them all. And speaking of the hard mode, as well as just changing the course, instead of finding lost balls, you actually find hidden clues dotted around the map. These give you hints as to where a hidden club is on the course for you to unlock. These are much harder to find than the balls and really require you to use the flying mechanic in the game that you can do by holding your arm above your head and pressing forward on the analog stick. It will take a good few hours to get through and collect everything that you need. But of course the main thing here is the multiplayer, and you can play with random people, or you can create a private room for up to 8 players, which is an absolute blast. It's so much fun playing this with mates, helping each other figure out the best way to get over a hole, or using your avatar to get in their way so they can't see where they're hitting the ball. It's always great fun, and exploring the maps looking for the hidden items is great. And now it's time for my obligatory gripes, of which there's actually very few. My main one is that I would love to see more interactivity and movement in the levels themselves, but it doesn't necessarily have to be things to collect. For instance, in the Spooky Castle level, in the outdoors section, there's a church in a graveyard. You can actually fly into this, but it's empty, like totally empty, as in not even programmed, so it causes textures and scenery to glitch out while you're in there. You're not meant to go in there, I know, and you can only do it when you're flying, as you can pass through walls while doing this, but imagine if you went in there and it just triggered a jump scare or something. That would be amazing. There's been loads of times when I'm exploring the maps, and I just thought it would be nice if you could trigger some little animated events or something like that. I got the Labyrinth DLC, which is based off the film, and it's really cool because they have scenes from the movie that are playing out as you walk around, but in the game's engine, and these look really cool, and just having little things like that makes the whole thing so much more enjoyable. It would be nice to have these on more of the stages. Other than that though, this game really is fantastic, and a must own if you have a Quest 2. And if you already have the game and want to play a round of golf, just let me know in the comments below. I basically always want to play this game, but don't tell Belt Buckle Bill. And finally for today, here is Blade and Sorcery Nomad. This game is exactly what it sounds like and involves lots of blades and lots of sorcery. There is no story mode or anything here. Currently the game is still being worked on hard and has received some massive updates since I've had it, but you can kind of tell it's not finished. In a nutshell, this is a sort of sword fighting playground, which has some really crazy and inventive things that you can do with your swords, shields, magic, and more. I'm not even sure where to start. In terms of game modes, you start in your little house, which you can explore and interact with. This gives you an idea of the basics of moving around, etc. And you have a weapon rack that gives you the opportunity to test out some of the weapons and also to get your kit for your future adventures. If you leave your house, you've got essentially what is a training ground where you can swing your swords, shoot your bows and arrows, and muck about with climbing. If you wander around a bit, you'll find a boat, which has a notice board next to it. It's here that you choose where you want to go and what you want to do. You have a few areas that are just you against waves of enemies until you die, and there's also one dungeon that lets you choose the length and difficulty. This is where I spend pretty much all of my time. Basically, it's a randomly generated dungeon, and you have to explore it until you find your boat and get off the island. Of course, there's loads of enemies and hazards all over the place for you to deal with too. It is very good fun, but you do tend to get quite samey levels. However, the gameplay is just so damn fun that I'm always happy to go back and play through it time and time again. Now, this video will go on for hours if I try to talk about everything you can do in this game, so I'll try to cram as much as I can in here. As well as swinging and stabbing with your weapons, you can also climb most surfaces, including walls, ropes and ladders. If you have certain weapons, you can use them as a zip line to go down ropes, which is always awesome to do. The physics here are really fun to play with. For example, I was stuck at the bottom of a hole once, but I had two swords, so I just shoved them in the wall and used them as a staircase, which was really cool to do. In fact, every time I play this game, I tend to learn something new. Normally, if you think, oh, I'd like to do that, most of the time it turns out that you can. You get a range of swords, axes, clubs, magic staffs and daggers, all of which work very differently, and you'll quickly find your favourite weapons. My personal favourite is just using the simple dagger like an assassin, running up to people at full speed and stabbing them through the ear. Standard stuff. But the game gives you so many cool ways to kill people. For example, if you sneak up behind someone, you can actually cover their mouth so they can't scream for help while you stab them in the arse. But don't worry if you've lost your weapons, you can often pick up things laying around like pots or books and smash them over people's heads. You can even grab the limbs of your enemies, so if you're quick, you can grab your opponent's arms so they can't swing their weapons at you. Or if you grab their head, you can just smash it into a wall a few times and that'll kill them. Or you can fight with your fists if you're feeling particularly pugilistic. You also have 3 magic types: fire, electricity and gravity. These do kind of what you'd expect, but also a lot more. You can assign different magic to each of your hands. The fire spell lets you shoot a fireball that damages opponents and can be directed with your arm movements. If you've got both hands using fire, you can fire fireballs, that's a lot of fire, from each of the hands, or you can combine them to make one huge fireball of death. The electric magic basically makes you a dark Jedi and you can electrocute enemies, and now that I think of it, I haven't actually tried it with 2 hands. That's what I'll be doing later. And the gravity spells, which by the way are definitely my favourite by a mile, let you do so much. I'll try and explain. You can charge gravity with one hand and use it like a force push to get enemies away from you or to knock them off ledges from a distance. You can use two hands to do this more powerfully, or you can hold them together to create a gravity ball that just makes everything drift into it. Though, to be honest, I can barely ever get that to work. I need to play around and figure out how it's actually done. You can also use gravity to grab enemies from far away, and you can hold them in the air or throw them around the room like a rag doll. You can even grab their head with one hand and a leg in the other hand and slowly tear them to pieces. It's amazing, and the game really lets you be a violent maniac in the best possible way. And the coolest thing you can do with the gravity, well, it's not the coolest thing, but it was when I figured it out, is if you're jumping down a large chasm and you have gravity assigned to both of your hands, you can actually use it to slow your descent so you don't take fall damage. It's just really cool. Also, if you're jumping in the air and then you use gravity and you thrust both your hands downwards, you can do a double jump. It's really cool. You can also use your magic to imbue your weapons, giving yourself flaming or electric swords which pierce armor much easier. And if you have enemies wearing metal armor, just use your electric magic and it will chain between them all. It looks really freaking cool. Or if you've got a really heavy weapon, if you use the gravity spell on it, it makes it light so you can use it with one hand. One of the biggest things that people love about this game though are the mods you can use. There's literally hundreds of mods that change the gameplay, giving you new weapons, armor and gameplay changes. These are amazing, though since the latest update I haven't actually been able to get any of mine to work. So if anyone knows what's happened there, please let me know, as I loved going around with my Thor hammer, Captain America shield and a lightsaber. I was unstoppable. I'm assuming there'll be another patch soon that will fix the mods that are not showing up. Of course though, the game isn't perfect by any means. The physics are still very wonky and weird stuff happens all the time. You can easily lose weapons in walls and enemies will often glitch around crazily. The graphics aren't particularly great, but they do the job. There is a large amount of blood, which is good, and that's what a game like this should have. The climbing here is also very wonky, especially when trying to climb walls. There's regular clipping issues with enemies and your own character. However, this is still a fantastic game to play and really does offer endless amounts of fun. I don't think I'll ever get bored of finding new ways to torture the NPCs, and the team are very vocal about their improvements that they're making to the game all the time, so it will only get better in the future. This is a must-own for any Quest 2 owner. So there you go, 6 games that I think everyone should have for the Oculus, Meta, Zuckerberg, Quest 2, whatever it's called. It's a fantastic bit of kit that I really do highly recommend. I've got plenty more games to cover in the future, but I always want more, so leave your suggestions of what games I need to try out in the comments below. On screen now you can see where you can follow us, so why not do so? We've got loads of cool content for everyone to enjoy. Now all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.